Good evening. It is Assistant District Attorney Lucas McCoy, aka Fox from InfernoFox Gaming Court. Instead of just playing the side of the prosecutor working to convict the court of public opinion for egregious obliviousness in recognizing the game of Harvestella, instead, I'd like to provide multiple sides of the argument for and against this game, as well as some more informational aspects and general observations. I just finished the game a short time ago and absolutely believe it is worth a playthrough. Huge thanks to Brandon at Just the Gems, Paige at FemTrooper, and especially Alex from Quality Gamer for getting me into this game. Harvestella released November 4th, 2022 on both the Nintendo Switch and PC Steam. It is a farming sim RPG hybrid where players must balance managing a farm with building relationships with party members and NPCs, while continuing a surprisingly in-depth story with a number of twists and turns. Let's start though with some background information on why Harvestella maybe didn't get enough attention from players upon its launch. One big reason was that publisher SquareEnix had released a ton of JRPGs around the time of Harvestella's release. Seriously, look at the output that Square had in 2022 from some absolutely excellent remakes and remasters like Live Alive and Crisis Core to some admittedly mid titles like Valkyrie Elysium and Star Ocean The Divine Force. It was a flood of JRPGs. And with that said, it's kind of no wonder that Harvestella itself could have gotten overlooked by this flood. Another reason I think the game didn't catch on was the limited marketing push that Square Enix had. To their credit, it was revealed in the June 2022 Nintendo Direct, but it, like the number of titles released by Square, got lost in a deluge of farming sims that were shown during this Direct. Also shown here was Disney Dreamlight Valley and Doraemon Story of Seasons, not to mention Personas 3 through 5 finally making their appearance on the Switch, and that honestly did steal the show quite a bit. It also appeared at the September 2022 Tokyo Game Show, as well as some social media Twitters via YouTube and Twitter, but honestly there really wasn't much coverage from both influencers and gaming media. I also believe the blending of two genres, such as the farming sim and RPGs, may not normally gel well, at least with maybe some fans. Now, the Rune Factory series totally flies in the face of this, and I have to admit that, especially for those that are fans of Rune Factory. Side note, if you guys have played the Rune Factory games as well as Harvestella, let me know your thoughts about both these games and the differences and whatnot in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. While I haven't played any of the Rune Factory series myself, from what I understand, it leans heavily on the farming sim elements, whereas Harvestella is a bit lighter on this aspect, but heavier on both the story, exploration, and combat. Individuals who just want a farming sim game or just action-based JRPG combat would or could be disappointed with Harvestella, since it's about 30% heavy in the former, 30% heavy in the latter, and the rest story and character development. The last reason I think people may not have played Harvestella were probably the kind of tepid reviews that may have influenced player purchasing decisions. Metacritic shows the Switch version with the most amount of reviews at an average score of 73. While many of the reviews praised both its comfort food-like nature and storytelling, they also had stated its light level of farming sim action was disappointing, especially for those reviewers that enjoy that type of gameplay. This last point, though, makes a great segue into one of the many arguments for playing Harvestella. For me personally, I feel like it made a great gateway game for a series like Rune Factory, single entries like Stardew Valley, or even more farming-intensive games like the Story of Seasons series. I normally would have never batted an eye at these type of games, but I genuinely had fun creating and raising my farm so I could cook dishes to support my dungeon runs for the main story, as well as making crops to sell and thus have Grilla to spend on weapon upgrades and whatnot. I also really enjoyed the beautiful world and overall aesthetics of the characters in the game. Within the first hour or so, when I stepped into the first area called Njord Steppe, I felt like the game was a cross between Xenoblade Chronicles and something like Stardew Valley even. The characters themselves, as well as the NPCs, have kind of like these Bravely Default aesthetics, though with regular body proportions. You know, they don't look chibi or anything. My thought of having the Xenoblade aesthetic was apparently prophetic, especially as the story went on. This is a no spoilers discussion of Harvestella, so don't worry there. But with that said, I was surprised how there were elements of sci-fi implemented in what I thought was going to be a fantasy-heavy JRPG. The scenario writers for the game do a great job of not only tying this in so well to the game, but a lot of the story points, especially those later in the game, feel prophetic to our real-world life today. And when I say that last part, I mean it with no reference politically. I'm just talking general state of the world. I found myself very curious to where the story was going to take me and my party of characters, even from the early, slower chapters of the game. There were a couple plot points and twists that genuinely surprised me, but honestly, most of it I saw coming, and you may too if you're no stranger to JRPGs. The soundtrack, though, for Harvestella is absolutely great, thanks to composer Go Shiina. While his early career in the early aughts were composing music to the likes of the Mr. Driller games and Klonoa 2, he's also composed music for the Tales of and Tekken series. I found the music itself to be light and calming for places like the farm and various towns, though dungeons often have vocal samples that pair well with the flute and violin instrumentation to give an appropriate gravitas to the area and the story the player is exploring. The boss themes themselves are great as well, though not at the same level as something like Final Fantasy XVI, and just the general overall theme sort of plays as the game goes on and sort of marries the general story beats as they go on as well. And I really appreciated that implementation. The simple yet fun action RPG battle system is another great highlight for me. And yes, I'm going to be leaning on the Xenoblade comparison for this discussion, because if you liked that battle system, you're going to enjoy Harvestella's. Though do note that unlike Xenoblade, the primary protagonist does not auto-attack. This is done by the player themselves. Some of the commonalities with Xenoblade's combat system includes battle parties don't contain more than 3 party members, including the main protagonist, whom can switch jobs. Switching jobs is something from like Xenoblade 3, for example. Jobs have different roles, much like characters that Xenoblade have, such as the base fighter job for close-up DPS, and a job called the Woglind for support and healing. And these jobs can only be changed by the main character, but they're gained when the party members of said job is recruited, and when in the party members stick exclusively to that job. Just like with Xenoblade's arts, special attacks have varying cooldown periods, though the player and party members can continue to do their normal attack. Both special and regular attacks deplete the stamina bar, which, emptied, results in the player being unable to attack at all. Now, I would like to go ahead and call my first witness to the stand. Paige, aka FemTrooper, can you please take the stand and give your testimonial for Harvestella?
Hey everybody, it's FemTrooper, and thank you, Glenn, for having me on to talk about why I love Harvestella so much. And wow, this is one of my favorite Switch games, and the reason I love it so much is because it's very surprising and isn't what it seems. I like games that really give you a surprise, and this game appears to be very cliche, standard JRPG, looks kind of medieval, looks really typical until you play it and you find out it is not that. And there is an element of science fiction here. It's just really cool. Not to mention the music is great, the game is gorgeous, the gameplay's fun, all that good stuff is there. But this game will shock you, and I really enjoy that because so many, JRPGs are real traditional and, you've seen it before. This one really surprised me, really shocked me. I was so happy to see it. Thank you, Glenn, for having me on, and I hope to see you guys over at my channel.
Thank you so much, Paige, for your testimonial. Now, I do have my own critiques that I have with Harvestella. One thing, the stamina aspect, it can kind of feel restrictive, though I thought maybe this was meant to challenge the player to prepare and manage their inventory, ensuring that they've got enough food stocked in their inventory, refill their hit points and stamina. At the beginning of the game, I'm going to admit that I was caught flat-footed in the middle of a dungeon with no stamina and surrounded by enemies. Thank goodness the game introduces an item called the return bell pretty early. This item can not only be made at the player's home via the crafting bench, but it can also be purchased at any of the merchants, and it can be used at any location that the player desires. If we're going to talk about another time that I was caught flat-footed in the game, it was when my character was sleepy. Yes, there is a day and night cycle within the game, and if players aren't paying attention, their character will stay up past 10 p.m. and be impacted by the sleepy debuff. Not only does this cause stamina recovery to slow, stamina recovers only when the player has eaten food, but movement also slows a bit, damage output decreases, and damage input also increases. And this really kind of sucks, because imagine you're in the middle of a dungeon crawl, or heck, in the middle of fighting monsters or a boss, and all of a sudden it's past 10 p.m., past your bedtime, and now you're taking 40% more damage and doing 40% less. Thankfully, dungeons also have multiple warp points called monolites, which have the option to not only transport players anywhere or that they found other monolites within the dungeon, but also all of them have that option to take the player back to their home at the farm. Once back home, you can have the player avatar sleep and start the day anew bright and early at 6 a.m. One critique I've heard others online leverage against the battle system is its simplistic nature. I mean, come on, there's no dodge or block buttons. This is again, I'm probably beating a dead horse, but this is again where the similarity to Xenoblade actually serves the player well, since that too doesn't have any dodging or blocking. Okay, I know what you're going to say, beyond specific character attributes or roles that cause characters to increase evasion or block attacks. Just like Xenoblade, there are certain abilities like backslash that cause enemies receive more damage when hit behind. I've also noticed enemies receive this increased damage for all attacks should they be hit from behind in Harvestella. There's also a more complex break system involving attacking an enemy's elemental weakness, causing said break status, which in turn increases overall damage output. A little bit of Xenoblade 2 thrown in there, but just a heck of a lot simpler. Some people also don't like the fact that there's no romance options in the game. I honestly think this aspect, the whole romance thing, gets a little overdone, especially with player-created avatars. I think it's a credit to the strength of the story that it is so good that it doesn't need a romance to fill it at all. And one last critique regarding kind of general story stuff is the numbering of the chapters. It makes it seem like the pacing goes all over the place, and one big example is just how big Chapter 3 is. In fact, it's split between 3 parts, and it was by far the longest one that I personally had to progress through. Others, like Chapter 5, feel like it's something from like a Dan Brown novel, in that it was super short and served more as a bridge to another aspect of the story. Now, I will still stand by the story itself because it is absolutely phenomenal, but they could have done a better job of numbering or breaking out these chapters. Now that we've touched upon some of these critiques, I'd like to call Brandon, aka Just the Gems, to the stand, because not only has he also played through Harvestella, he has been a true advocate for this game since he first finished it.
Hey friends, it's Brandon from Just the Gems. Thank you to InfernoFox for having me on to set the record straight on Harvestella. Let me just get out of the way. There have been a lot of good games over the years that have flown under the radar, but none in my mind that were more deserving of attention than Harvestella. This is an experience disguised as a fantasy farming sim, probably in a corporate attempt to ride the coattails of other popular game experiences of the day. but it is owed a chance to stand on its own feet. Harvestella is the perfect story for me. It walks the line between fantasy and science fiction, which is exactly where I'm most comfortable, and the story it tells is deep and complex and moving. The characters you meet along the way, especially the ones that join up with you to fill out your party, are among the most interesting and well-developed characters in JRPGs in recent memory. One thing I absolutely love is the side content, which is a sentence I don't think I've ever really said before. But a lot of the side content in this game is dedicated to fleshing out the party characters even more, giving you more insight into their motivations. So to me, the characters and story would be more than enough for Harvestella to make it onto my favorites list. The reason it's pushed its way past so many other games on that list, though, is because of its aesthetic. This is a truly beautiful game in every way. Visually, I mean, it's absolutely gorgeous. It manages to pull off true beauty in its design despite being a AA Nintendo Switch game. If you look at individual models or pieces of scenery, you might be able to see that this game didn't have the biggest budget. But all the pieces together working in concert create some of the most striking settings I've ever seen in video games. It's the power of art design. You can have the highest quality graphics running on the highest settings on the most powerful computer, but without good art design, you end up with technically impressive games that feel lifeless. Harvestella takes the smarter approach. Less emphasis on technical specs and much more focus on crafting the available resources together to make something beautiful. And the music. In terms of the presentation of the game, the graphics contribute quite a lot, but I don't know if anything could claim to do as much as the music. The composer of Harvestella is Go Shiina, one of the most talented video game composers working today, and his compositions on this game rank among my all-time favorites. Yeah, I mean it, the soundtrack is that good. If you're on the fence about Harvestella, I hope that this was able to convey even a tiny sliver of my affection for this game. It's truly a remarkable piece of work, and it deserves significantly more love than I can give it on my own.
Thank you so much again, Brandon, for your testimonial. One JRPG aspect that Harvestella has is that it has a lot of female characters, and especially the party members. I noticed that, they are quite beautiful and are garbed in stylish clothes that accentuate their svelte physiques. Beyond this superficial view, I noticed that after a few hours into the game, I started to feel that Harvestella has a sort of feminine energy to it. It was something that I couldn't quantify at the time, but I think I got a good beat of why this is. Not to say that this exudes, stereotypical girl tropes like pink and dolls and whatever else women get pigeonholed with, but there's a real sense that this game leans not just to the stereotypical male gamer, but to female gamers as well. Perhaps this could be attributed to the farming and life mechanics akin to Stardew Valley or Rune Factory. It could also be due to the emphasis on the building of relationships, not just with the main party members that the player meets, but also with quests that various NPCs have, as well as understanding their motivations to the goals that they are trying to achieve. My own sexist thought that I had was that I noticed there was a large emphasis on caregiving with the various children that are in the towns and villages on some of those quests. I can't recall a game where my character has interacted with children more often before. And beyond the main character, the characters and world itself is colorful and stylish, sporting lighter, fantasy storybook-like aesthetic. This often runs counter to other games in the genre that lean harder on grittier, darker tones, which tend to be dominated more by male gamers. Though I will add that as the story develops, there is more darker tones and darker environments. Won't spoil anything on that, but it could be possible that these lighter fantasy storybook elements were more a stylized differential to accentuate the later part of the game. All of what I'm saying is not to say the game isn't playable for male gamers. I mean, heck, I'm a male gamer. Brandon was a male gamer, and we enjoyed our time with it. This is just something that I felt was worth noting, because for better or worse, these sort of elements can help attract or deter a myriad of different gamers to it. Regarding the male gamer slant, as the story progresses, it leans away from its fantasy element and more into sci-fi, almost dystopian themes. If the overall aesthetics and gameplay, especially at the beginning, were meant to attract female gamers, the idea of slowly introducing these gamers into themes that tend to be more male-dominated almost feels like the game itself wants to lead a path for female gamers to explore games that have these darker themes. I feel it's a credit to Harvestella in general for being a gateway for male gamers such as myself to be introduced to farming and cozy games, as well as female gamers to be introduced to more complex and dark JRPG themes that sometimes seem to be gatekept by the hardest of hardcore gamers. Now, for my final witness, I'm going to be calling on the very person who sold me on this game over a year ago. She worked with me on a previous collaboration and spoke about this title, and it was this description and her entry in this collab that really caught my eye, specifically with the story. Alex from Quality Gamer, please take the stand and give your testimonial.
Harvestella is one of those games that I don't think I'll ever get sick of talking about because it was such a surprising and impactful gaming experience for me. I absolutely love it. Hi everybody, my name's Alex, aka Quality, and thank you so much to InfernoFox Gaming for having me on for this very, very special video. I'm so happy to be a part of this project in defense of Harvestella. Now, for my experience with Harvestella, when it was first announced back in a Nintendo Direct, I was like, oh, this looks cool. It looks like a Rune Factory kind of situation. But I wasn't like totally sold on it right away. I asked for it for Christmas the year that it came out, but I didn't really play it. It kind of fell to the wayside until one day my mom was like, I need a game to play. I was like, well, maybe try Harvestella. I have not played it, so I don't know what it's like, but maybe you try it. She played a little bit of it. I was kind of starting to get interested in it. I loved the music right off of the bat. And then once I started to get more into the YouTube sphere of things, I saw so many people talking about how good of a game Harvestella was. So with those two experiences, that's what's really brought me into the game, and oh my gosh, I am so glad it did. Harvestella is one of those gaming experiences that completely subverts your expectations, and I think that's what I love the most about this game. You go into it thinking that it's going to be a farming sim with some fantasy elements, but it's so much more than that. I'm not gonna get into any spoilers, however, the story of Harvestella truly, truly impacted me and really made me think for a few days after the credits rolled. It's one of those types of games that will just make you think about your existence and your life and everything that has led to this moment. And it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Not only that, but the soundtrack is beyond gorgeous. One of my favorite video game soundtracks of the past few years, to be honest, and I think it's heavily underrated. Absolutely underrated. There's so many different themes that fit perfectly to their scenarios and locations, and it's just, honestly, the battle themes are a bop. The main theme is gorgeous and just heart-wrenching, and it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal soundtrack. Highly recommend giving it a listen. That said, it's much better to experience the music in-game. So that's just even more reason for you to play Harvestella. This is truly one of those games too that is much better experienced on your own rather than watching somebody else play it. I feel as though the story beats in this game hit differently for people, and I think it's, you know, it's a very unique single player experience that I really do think everybody needs to have. Not only that, you've got great combat, wonderful characters, beautiful locations, and yeah, just a story and a soundtrack that will stick with me for the rest of my life. So please go play Harvestella. It's absolutely worth the time. It's not a long game, but it's worth every single minute.
Thank you so much, Alex, again for your testimonial. Now, for my closing arguments, I'd like to ask you, the court of public opinion, to consider everything presented to you today. When the game was originally announced, marketed, and then released, it didn't get a lot of response from the larger audience or even general fans of JRPGs. While there are some critiques regarding its simplistic farming sim elements, its management of stamina and day-night cycles, there are positives to some of these aspects that help to give the game character. Pound for pound, Harvestella has a fun gameplay loop, balancing the farming sim portions with intriguing dungeon crawling and a fun action-based battle system. The story, character development, Environments and music are absolutely stellar, making this a game that if you missed it, is totally worth a playthrough. With 2 caveats. Make sure that you try and catch this game on sale from either the Nintendo eShop or Steam storefronts. It does run $60 USD normally, and I have seen it go on sale a number of times before. I snagged my copy via a Humble Bundle for Steam, and that runs into my second caveat. I would recommend playing the PC or Steam version. While I have it physically on the Nintendo Switch, I've heard that this version has some frame drops, longer load times, and some other issues that occurred due to the simpler hardware that is the Switch. I did 100% of my playthrough on my Steam Deck, of which you've been seeing captures from on this video. It ran extremely smooth, load time was minimal, and the environments looked absolutely stellar. Huge thanks once again to Brandon at Just the Gems, Paige at FemTrooper, and Alex at Quality Person here on YouTube for joining me. I will make sure to post links to their YouTube pages in the description below, so make sure you check out their content and subscribe to them as well. If your interest has been piqued on Harvestella, or maybe you've played it before, let me know in the comments section below. Otherwise, thank you again so much for watching, and have a great day.